Hello and welcome to the very first episode of the People of Payments podcast. My name is Nathan. I'm the founder of Sourcific Talent. And in this podcast, we aim to speak with not only the founders and senior executives across the fintech and payments industry, but more so the people within the companies that are really the driving force behind realizing the mission and the vision for the companies they work for. This is why it's an absolute pleasure to be speaking with Amarni Saunders, account executive at Paddle, to share his story of growth and progression within the industry and share insights that might just inspire us and support others on a very similar journey. Amarni, the very first guest on our podcast, thanks for taking the time out of your day. How's life, my friend?
Yeah, good. Very, very busy. End of quarter, lots of traveling, but yeah, it's good. It's very good.
Good. Sounds good. Awesome. Well, look, I guess the best place to start is just to really get a bit of an insight to your backstory, right? So it'd be great to hear about Amarni before Paddle, and ultimately what made you kind of lead into payments and join Paddle as a company as well.
100%, yeah. So my educational background is in law. So I went to Durham and studied law for a few years. And I was adamant that I was going to be a lawyer, going to be a commercial solicitor. That was always going to be where my life trajectory was going to go. And I was ready to graduate around like COVID time. So kind of the world was a bit like crazy at that kind of period. And I had this sort of realization, speaking to a few different people, like maybe I didn't want to move into that. Maybe I wanted to like enjoy my life a little bit more and go into something with a little bit more to it. So somehow ended up going into recruitment straight after COVID, which I initially really enjoyed and was successful. But I think for me, like, I just wanted a little bit more like to work closely with a specific business and like be selling like ideas and concepts rather than like going into the recruitment side of people. And I didn't really have the same impact that I think I wanted out of a career. And then one of my friends in recruitment, she recommended like looking into fintech and looking into Paddle, and then joined in May 2021, and the rest is kind of history, I guess, from there.
Fantastic. Sounds good. And what was it that kind of brought you into Paddle? Was it something that you were specifically looking to go into regards to payments, or I mean, what was the core catalyst behind joining Paddle itself?
Yeah, I think for Paddle, like I really liked the idea of working for a business that was like in a good position now, but wanted to like scale really, really quickly and had these like really ambitious ideas. They just raised, I think it was 70 million about 5 months before I joined. They like had loads of backing previously and like made loads of noise in the market. So like that was really exciting to me. But then like the payment side of things, like I'd always kind of been interested in that, I guess, in my own capacity, never in like a professional capacity, but I'd always found like the number side of things interesting as well. And did a lot of like the crossover with like payments and law like at uni. So it kind of aligned like with that sort of business.
Nice. Awesome. And you just mentioned that they raised 70 million about 5 months before you joining. I mean, what did the business landscape look like? Because how long ago was it now? Was it close to 3 years ago that you joined Paddle?
Yeah, it was May 2021. So it'd be 3 years in a couple of months. So it was very, very different.
I can imagine. So yeah, talk us through what the landscape was like at the time.
So when I joined, we were around 100 employees, just raised Series C funding a few months before. And the reason they'd raised that Series C was to like basically go after like bigger B2B companies, like go more up market. The team that I was joining was like 6 or 7 people. And it was a little bit like still trying to establish exactly what type of accounts to go after, where the product market fit was. There were a lot of challenges around like the TAM of the business as well, because we only sell to like subscription SaaS companies. So it was like, how can we open that up? Is this the right TAM? There's like a lot of different challenges. So it's definitely like very different to if I'd gone and joined like Salesforce or Stripe or something like that. So there are a lot of like big challenges for the business in that side of things.
Okay, nice. And so ultimately what you're saying here is with no BDR experience, no previous payments experience, no SaaS sales experience, even at the very least. You're kind of joining a business where there's challenges, you're having to open up new markets, going into slightly larger companies, and pretty much building out that new vertical from scratch, right? I mean, that's a lot to take on for the first position within a BDR function. I mean, how did you even go around finding your feet in the first place in that type of environment?
Yeah, it was the first like 6 months, year was like absolutely crazy for exactly the reasons you said. I always talk about not doing this double jump, and I think I did a triple one in like one move. But like, it's also kind of, that's what I wanted. Like that, I wanted an environment that was like really, really fast paced and like loads to learn. They hadn't figured it out, and there's like loads of potential. But I think like going around that in the early days was just like understanding like you have so many people to like support you and lean on. This hasn't been mapped out, which is actually like a really big opportunity rather than like a burden. Perfect. No worries. Yeah. And I think like the big difference for me personally was going from like being in recruitment where like you're speaking to hiring managers, you're making a lot of like cold calls, and a lot of it is on the phone, like 100%. Going from that to like more technical founders, CFOs, like much smaller businesses comparatively, and like speaking to the person in charge of everything, who are a lot less responsive on the phones. You don't have an endless list of people to just call. So like you need to do a lot of like mapping out personas and like creating plans for like accounts and stuff. It was definitely a lot. It was definitely a big transition. But I really enjoyed it. And I think like Paddle gives a really good environment to like fail quickly and like gives you that support as well.
Yeah, and I think that's the beauty of startups, right? So as you know, I work with startup businesses, and I think it does give people the creative freedom to go out there and try new things and be experimental and like you say, fail fast where you need to. And look, one of the really great things I think about your journey is the duration that you've been within Paddle, right? So as we mentioned earlier, coming up for 3 years. I've got some stats here for you. So you've seen consistent progression. So 19 months of your time at Paddle years within that BDR function, of different seniorities. So BDR, then through to senior, then through to team lead. So you saw great progression in that BDR piece. And I think one of the big things that we see in the market right now, especially with myself talking to so many BDRs, is there seems to be this real rush for people to want to become an account executive as quickly as possible. And look, I get it, right? Because account executives, higher base salary, of course, there's that progression element there. Slightly better earning potential for sure. But at the same time, a stat that I saw also the other day on LinkedIn was that if you've been a BDR for between 6 to 10 months, then the likelihood of you failing as an account executive actually sits at 55% if you have that, again, 6 to 10 months of experience as a BDR. That's over half. 11 to 16 months, that reduces down to 31%.
Wow.
And then 16 months and above reduces down to 6% of people would fail.
Wow.
So there's clearly some insights there around taking your time as a BDR and really, I guess, utilizing and embracing the experience you can gain there before trying to rush into an account executive role and potentially jeopardize your career rather than make it. But what are your thoughts? Because you are somebody that's been on that journey and you have taken your time in that BDR function. Whether that's intentional or unintentional, we can learn that from you as well. But what are your thoughts of those kind of stats? And would you agree that it's really important to have that longevity as a BDR?
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting stats, and I think it's not as surprising given my experience with Paddle that the numbers would reflect that, because I think obviously Paddle is one company in a massive ecosystem, but what we do is very, very, very complicated. The types of customers we sell to can be very, very like narrow in like what they're looking for. So like understanding the market and understanding our product as well as the like competitor landscape is so crucial to your success. And the longer that you are a BDR, I think gives you more chance to like pick up those skills and like understanding like who do we sell to, why do they buy, how do we engage them, like just gives you so much more time to pick that up. So it's not as surprising for a company like Paddle that the longer you're in that role, the more you then actually will pick up like those abilities. What's really interesting for us, and I wish we could like name names and like give the stats for this, but every single person almost that we've hired at Paddle into an AE role, the turnover is like close to 100%. For everyone that we've promoted internally into the AE role, the retention is like probably close to 100% as well. So it's crazy that like the way that's worked on our side as well. And I think the underlying thing there is the understanding of the products and of the business, but also understanding like your own internal processes as a business, understanding who to go to when you have questions about this, understanding the way the tools work, even simple things like getting up to speed with Salesforce and Gong and like all of these sales tools, like having that experience already as a BDR for a long time has like a massive impact, I think, on your ability to do those things. But there's also like, there's something to be said for like being able to consistently hit target as a BDR for like 16 plus months and like doing really well without being promoted yet, which I think was probably arguably more difficult than hitting like consistent target as an AE for like a year and a quarter, because it's like every single month you have so little time to like not be performing or like waiting for things to come in or like having like an off day. Like it's so like the velocity is so high. So I think like when you've done that consistently, you've learned a lot of the skills that are going to make a successful AE. You're already kind of operating at a high velocity. So when you make that jump, not only are you ready for it and you feel like you've got loads to prove, but like you've got all those soft skills like in place to really perform. Obviously, you learn so much when you become an AE, and it's like day one again of like all that stuff. But you build like a really strong and like solid foundation, I think.
Yeah, and it's all kind of the muscle memory, right? So it's if you learn that BDR role and you learn how to prospect really really well, and then you learn how to sell the value proposition of the solution that you have really well, and kind of do that discovery piece with clients, it's that kind of natural progression. And yes, of course, to account executive, but I think nowadays when you look at the market and what people are looking for from account executives, it's no longer the sense where, okay, there's two very different positions where you have your BDRs that are doing all your prospecting and qualifications and so on, then your account executives that are just taking those inbounds and kind of going through the closing and demos and so on. AEs are now expected to do their own prospecting as well, right? So it is genuinely 360. So I think having that foundation, you're absolutely right. But look, I think also when we're talking about on that particular subject, there's going to be lots of people out there that may listen to this and say, well, look, that's all well and good if you're in a company that also gives you the opportunity for growth into an account executive role. Right. But I think one of the biggest challenges we're seeing in the market is that, there are BDRs who have done their 18 plus months that are consistently hitting target really well, but they've just hit this bottleneck where there's genuinely been a lot of overhiring, and that's created issues when it comes to people being able to get progression to an account executive within that business. Now, the challenge that they will have to overcome is they've only got a couple of directions they can go in there if they want to remain within the industry and within sales, which is trust in the business they're working with right now, and have those sometimes hard to have conversations to say, well, whilst I appreciate it can't happen now, what do those timelines look like? And then they need to work out whether that's going to be something that works for them. If it is, fantastic. If it isn't, really the only other option is for them to then look elsewhere in the market and see if they can secure an opportunity. But the question I have then is, if they're a BDR and they don't have experience as an AE, how easy is it going to be for them to find an opportunity as an account executive in the market? And if they were to find that opportunity, how difficult is it going to be for them to, I guess, find their way in that position? Because not only are they having to now learn how to be an account executive with, a new support system that's around them, people they haven't worked with previously, but also most likely a different product, a different value proposition, a different set of tools, all these kind of things they're having to also learn at the same time. So what's your advice for somebody that finds themselves in that position where, it's a real fork in the road for them in terms of what they do next?
Yeah, I think it's a really great question, and probably one that faces like a lot of BDRs at the moment, particularly with, like you say, where companies have overhired into those functions when maybe the funding environment was a little bit stronger and now there's not as much progression into those roles. We definitely had a similar thing at Paddle around about 12 months ago. And I think the question you have to ask yourself is not too dissimilar to what you said. Like, do I believe in this company? Do I see a future with this company? Have I been here long enough that I understand the product? And I really think that opportunity will become available. And I think if the answer is yes, then you decide to stick around. And I think it's about, where can I like refocus some of the energy that is, the frustration of not being promoted. A similar thing happened to me. So we had I would describe it as an exodus just because of how small our team was, where we had like 3 people leave the business in the space of like a month there because there weren't enough places for BDRs to move up to AEs, and they moved on to other businesses to become AEs straight from BDRs. They'd moved on within 8 months or close to that, right? Because it's,
Okay.
like you say, it's so tricky to go from having no AE experience to then having to learn new product, new systems, a lot of the things we were talking about earlier. And it can be like a real challenge as well, especially if like the culture in that new business is different to the one that you're used to. Maybe they're just cutthroat and, you know, they fire people after that first quarter if you don't perform. So that can be really tricky. But I think one way you can kind of, I guess, buy your time, but also make your day-to-day more comfortable whilst you wait is like, ask yourself, where else in the business can I maybe provide some value? Are there any other roles that I can maybe take on, or responsibilities or projects that I can jump into? Like for me, when I was having that kind of, I really want to jump to AE, but like I know that role is 6 months away. What can I do to keep me engaged? That was when I took on the BDR team lead function and, you know, started running coaching sessions and started doing bits of mentoring and like speaking with different people in the businesses. And that kept me so engaged that like when the AE role came, I was like, oh, already amazing. Like, you know, I could do this a little bit longer. We had other people moving into like more technical roles, people moving into partnerships. And like, I think it not only gives you like that engagement, but also like the amount of extra stuff you learn from it will only set a stronger foundation as you move into an AE, and the respect and credibility you get with the business for sticking it out in those time periods, I think are unparalleled. So yeah, my advice would be stick in if you believe in the company. If the company you don't believe in, move on and try your hand. But also there's a final thing. I've also seen a lot of BDRs that actually do like a lateral move where they will go and be a BDR at another company for a few months and then move to AE. And again, it's only anecdotal, but even they've been way more successful than like just jumping up to be an AE. So yeah, it's definitely not just the problems go away if you go and become an AE at another company.
No, I fully agree with you, I think. And, you know, I've also seen a lot of people make those lateral moves, but there's also been a lot of people I've spoken to that are quite, you know, they're hell-bent. I'm not looking for another BDR role. It doesn't matter if it's a promotion to a senior or even a team lead. It has to be AE. And I think this is really good insights for you know, some of those people, because look, don't get me wrong, you can be successful going from one position as a BDR into another company as an account executive, right? It has been done. We're not saying it's impossible, but what we're saying is you are going to be, you know, putting yourself up a steep mountain to climb to be able to achieve the results that you would be able to achieve if you was a BDR first and then account executive within a company, right? So appreciate your insights there. And the other side to your journey is that leadership piece, right? And I think you've been the BDR team lead. You understand what it takes not only in the BDR function, but also then to manage a team. As an account executive now, you have, I believe, a team of 2 BDRs within your pod that you also take the time to mentor and to support, which benefits them as much as yourself. And I guess one of the insights I believe you're going to be able to really share here is around what you believe it takes to be able to, I guess, execute in that BDR function. I'm not talking just from a skill set perspective, but just from a mindset perspective and the kind of traits you would expect to see from somebody that's going to highlight the fact that, you know, you are going to be an incredible BDR.
Definitely. And I think there's a few key ones, and I think they're probably true not only as a good BDR, but as a good AE, and then probably even beyond that, just in the kind of sales vertical, that are really, really key. The main one is resilience for me. Like, I think, and especially working in recruitment, you can definitely empathize with this. Like, there are going to be days where things are just not going your way. It's difficult. You've been told a whole manner of things on the phone that have not pleased you. Meeting you thought you were going to book in, like confidence is low, right? You've been putting in loads of effort, no results. And I think the people that can keep going and like keep doing the inputs that they know will work in the long run, but just haven't, like on that day or that week or even that month, I think they're the ones that when they do get the rewards and build that momentum, they excel. And they're the kind of people who I love working with as well, because it's less about, oh, how can I complain about this thing that's not working? And instead, how can I find a solution and like move forward? So I think resilience is definitely like the key one. Like if they've got resilience, I feel like you can build a lot of other things like around that. But the
Yeah.
second one, which is slowly becoming my favorite, is more, and I don't think it's the right word for it, but like proactivity. And just like,
Okay.
I think this has a massive compounding effect, because I think people who are either always looking to like do a little bit better, or like always looking for like a problem to solve, or like see a process and they're like, oh, I think we can improve that. Or like,
Yeah.
how can they go the extra mile when it comes to outreach, or like calling someone, or like, we had an example of a BDR at Paddle. He went onto someone's Twitter and found out like who their favorite band was, and then like rewrote a song based on like that band. And like, for me, like that's it, it's quite hard to quantify that as a quality. But if you have that in abundance, I think like you will go very, very far. So that's a massive one for me
Yeah.
as well. And the BDRs I work with now, like they have that in abundance. They'll always be messaging me like, right, should we try this? Can we add this on? Can we do this? Can we do that? And it's brilliant. And then the last one, I
It's
think,
that creativity.
yeah, definitely creativity, and like to have the kind of hardworking and effort to like go with that as well. So it's not just like
Yeah.
you're creative once a month and then you don't do anything.
Yeah.
Um, and then I think the final one is like people that are willing to learn and like want to constantly improve themselves. And I guess these three kind of all fit in together. But I think if we think of like sports analogies, like those people will always outshine those people who just have like natural ability. And the compound effect of that,
Yeah.
look forward like 5 years into your career, 10 years into your career, like you're going to be way ahead of the people who maybe are really naturally very good at sales, or are being a BDR, but they don't have that same work ethic. And it's things like asking for feedback, looking for extra like opinions, being comfortable with like failing at things, and then like how can I make sure that doesn't happen again. I think those
Yeah.
qualities, like if you've got a decent amount of those three, you're definitely going to be successful as a BDR in the long run. So yeah.
Amazing. And you mentioned there being comfortable, and I think being comfortable in being uncomfortable is also one of those things, right? Because you can, again, as you mentioned, I know it from recruitment, right? I mean, a lot of the role of a BDR is kind of getting on the phone and having conversations, whether that's cold or warm calls, and you can have some people say some weird stuff to you. So it's about being ready to be uncomfortable and go through that objection handling, right? But and on that as well. So we talked there about a lot of the traits and the mindsets and so on. Of course, to summarize there, you said resilience. Absolutely, you've got to have that thick skin. You've got to have that why, and you've got to keep being able to push through, right? The kind of creativity side and proactiveness to make sure that you're always coming up with new ideas and you're always looking at ways to improve. Um, and I think on on the other side of that, where we speak to many companies as well that come to us and say, okay, we're looking for a BDR, we're looking for them to have industry experience, we're looking for them to have a year BDR's experience, background, etc. I mean, you are living proof, right? That actually you don't need to have come from within the industry, you don't need to have been a BDR previously. And whilst I do get that you had some sales experience in recruitment, it's a very different approach to selling. So I guess what are your thoughts, and what would you say to companies out there that said they don't believe it can work if they haven't got the BDR experience already?
Yeah, I think it, you're missing out on a lot of really, really, really good talent. And almost like sometimes not having BDR experience can actually be even more beneficial, because you're looking at it from a different lens. You don't already have the like the toll of the BDR role that it can take on you if you've been in it at a different company and now you're looking for like really fast progression at a different company. Like that can also be a negative. And the same with industry experience. Like if you've worked in payments for a year or 2 years, but the kind of segment you've worked in is adjacent to this new one, you're probably bringing in information that is maybe not as relevant. So you actually then need
Yeah.
to like re-coach this person. And you can get this like, it's kind of like aura of a bit of arrogance as well, of like, I've already been a BDR, I know what I'm doing, like you don't need to coach me, like just give me a phone and I'll sort it out.
Yeah.
And again, I think a lot of the times like that can lead to failure. We've definitely seen it at Paddle where like we actually now actively try not to hire people with BDR experience, because it's just not
Okay.
worked out as well with that industry experience, because it's like they kind of think they've already got it and they know it, but every business is going to be unique. Like, you're going to have to coach them in unique challenges of your business, of your segment, of your competitors, of the way your company sells things. And I think having outside experience that's not BDR is sometimes really, really helpful. Like, even people that come across from like marketing functions or customer success functions, that can then be so good.
Okay, interesting. And I mean, to be fair, we're actually speaking to another guest next week, which is going to be about diversity, inclusivity, and all those kind of factors, right? And I think this also leads into that, because I think when people talk about DE&I, there's so much emphasis on gender and race and all these kind of different backgrounds being welcome into the business. But actually, when you look at the neurodiversity piece and the difference of experiences and cultures that come into a business, in this case from different industries, again, it's just those different fresh perspectives that can bring a different approach to how you're doing things and may improve things overall as well, right?
100%.
So no, fully agree. Sounds good. All right, killer question for you. So you've been doing this for, as we've said before, 3 years, and I'm sure you've learned a huge amount along the way. I'm sure you've made mistakes along the way. I'm sure you failed at certain things. It just happens, right? It's part of the learning process. But now you've got this experience, and you look back over your time, whether that's as a BDR or even as an account executive, what would you say would be one of those kind of core things that you would either change or you would have done differently if you could turn back the clock?
It's a great question. Very I think like, and it's still something that I'm trying to put into practice, so it's worth saying, but like, recognizing that there is not one linear path through your career. And like, for me, that goes even further back to like deciding not to do law and then like moving out of recruitment. And like, it's very easy to build up this anxiety of like, oh, I could have been here if I just stuck with this, or like I could be 2 years into this, or when I was a BDR being like, oh, well, that person was only a BDR for 6 months and now they're in AE, so I'm like really far behind. And I think like that anxiety is just, obviously it's natural, but it's wasted energy and there's never going to be a clear path. And what really helped me with that was like looking at people who I thought were like successful or had done really well, and just honestly like stalking their LinkedIn and seeing, oh, actually, at this point in their career, they were doing something completely different. And look how well they've done now. So like, it can work out. So if I could go back and change things, I would definitely spend less time like worrying about like where I thought I was supposed to be and just making the most of like where I was. There's a more kind of specific example with like paddle in particular as well, with like a mistake when I moved into the strat function here. And that was a very new function for us. We hadn't really mapped it out yet. We'd like made a lot of like promises to the board and stuff about how we are going to deliver on it, right? And it looked really exciting.
Okay.
And I was one of the first BDRs to move into it, and it was really difficult. We were really struggling to like book meetings. We weren't sure if the product was a good fit for it. Like, it was really, really tricky. And I think my mistake was that I'd slightly internalized like, oh, it's me. Like, I'm no longer good at this role. I was doing really well before, but like, I've lost it. I need to change something. And I think like the hindsight there is like having the confidence instead to like take yourself out of the situation. Can we look at external factors involved here? And for us, that ended up like going back to the business and saying like, I think there's maybe a little bit more work we need to do here. Some stuff on the product, maybe this isn't where we win best. And they're really difficult conversations to have. But like my lesson from that and thing I would change going forward is like, be confident in your own abilities, and you're not just going to lose like all of your the things that have made you successful like overnight.
Yeah.
Always going to be practice. So yeah, I think across those two, there's like some big things that I would change, and like I'm still trying to like proactively do as well.
Yeah, and I think that's the nature of the BDR function, right? And when you do shift one kind of core market to another, there's always going to be those teething issues. And I think having the confidence to be able to go back to the business and say, look, I know it's not me. I'm doing the same process as I was before, but there's a bottleneck here. There's something not quite clicking,
Yeah.
and having the opportunity to kind of dive into that. And that takes confidence in itself to have those conversations with senior people in the business as a BDR, right? But I think just have that confidence and go for it. And like you say, it's very unlikely that from going to bed one night to waking up the next morning, the years of experience that you've gained in sales and delivering in your role is just disappeared. So there's got to be another reason.
Yeah, and it always feels like when you're in the middle of the situation, it's like that's the only conclusion, and then you take yourself out of it, and it's like, oh no, I think there's more to it.
Yeah, absolutely. Sounds good. Nice. All right. Well, this is the People of Payments podcast after all. So keen to get some of your insights into the payments market itself. So I guess right now in this space, and specifically in the space you work in,
Mm.
what are you seeing as some of the hottest trends that are really catching people's attention, and what is it that excites you about those trends as well for you to kind of raise them today?
Definitely, and I think it's everyone's favorite buzzword at the moment, but the stuff around AI is just fascinating. Like, I think it's going to have a massive impact in payments, but I think an even broader impact than just like being a buzzword or like being like a hot trend to jump on. Like some of the automation we're seeing in like financial processes, in fraud detection around payments. There's businesses like Counts and Feeds that are like leading the way there, and it looks like really exciting. One of the most interesting things, and it's something that is important to Paddle as well, is around like payments orchestration. So it's
Okay.
basically like the ability to have like multiple payment service providers and like acquirers and banks, like all of these different pieces that historically like make up a very complicated payment integrated into like one layer. And
Yeah.
the goal of it is to like improve like authorization rates and acceptance rates. But with AI, that is made so much easier to be able to like smart route all of that stuff. And I think
Yeah.
the innovation that we'll see there is so exciting. On the other side of the coin, it's kind of worrying to be in payments because it's like, is this going to exist in 10
Yeah.
years? I don't know if my business will still be here, but it's exciting. Like, it means that problem's getting solved. So yeah, that's definitely one. And then the second one is like maybe a little bit more science fiction, but like it's very exciting to me. It's like the impact of like wearable technology. So like I'm sure you'd have seen all the hype around like Vision Pro and like Meta Quest,
Yeah.
like all this stuff, right?
Absolutely.
But I think there's a possibility, and I don't know if this is 5 years, 10 years, 50 years, but like where payments are intertwined with this kind of wearable tech, and like you go from not having a credit card or a debit card in payments anymore to like it's just intertwined with your user interface. And that again is a scary concept because again we might all be out of a job in this segment, but like the implications of that are very, very interesting. So I think that's a big trend that a lot of companies are probably looking at like AI and wearable tech as like the big verticals for them.
Yeah. Okay. And when you look at the Paddle, I don't know if you're able to share on this podcast specifically, but when you look at Paddle, how are you guys now starting to utilize AI within the processes that you're building out, and specifically if that's payments orchestration, because again that is an extremely hot topic that I'm speaking to a lot of people about as well. So how are you utilizing that internally to kind of make the most of that?
Massively, yeah, and I'll try my best to not get myself fired here. Some secrets, but like on a top level, and I think we've shared some of this stuff publicly, but like as a merchant of record, we take on like a lot of risk from a lot of the companies that we sell on behalf of. So a way that AI is helping us is like actually vetting those companies. So doing like due diligence checks and like KYB, KYC checks, and like how can we
Yeah.
use AI to speed up that stuff. So like I think our average verification time went from like being a couple of weeks to a month to like hours. Like that's how much it's reduced that time. So yeah, there's a lot of impact of AI, and I think that's probably the safest one that I can share with that.
Yeah, fair enough, understandable, and we've kind of we've kind of addressed my next question in all honesty, which is around the future of payments, right? And this industry is certainly showing no signs of slowing down at all. There's so many new startups coming out. There's big investment being made in the fintech space. As you've already mentioned, you've got the whole wearable side of things. You've got AI. If you was to look at the next 12 months,
Mm.
and kind of avoid some of the hypotheticals in terms of, as you mentioned, what could happen in 50 years. But if you kind of looked over the next 12 months, what do you believe is going to be the kind of biggest advancements within the payments industry. And I'm going to revisit these predictions with people, by the way, so we can see if you're going to be right later down the line.
Yeah, well, I want there to be some money on it if we're revisiting these.
Yeah, why not?
So I think like the major developments for me, 12 months, I think like emerging markets. So I think countries like, so we do a lot of traveling around to like meet customers and conferences and stuff. I think countries like India and places in like Latin America, where historically payments have been like very, very challenging and maybe haven't had as much investment. I think now with things like AI bridging the gap and like big fintech companies like focusing on these markets, I think we'll see a massive shift in terms of them becoming like bigger markets. So like there's a provider called eBanks that work in LATAM and they provide solutions like in like Brazil, Argentina, Chile, and like to enable payments across like B2C and B2B. And I think that's going to be like a big deal. There was a big partnership the other day between Amazon and RBI in India to like set like power a load of payments on that side of things. So I think a lot of those like fintech markets will grow massively. But it does depend on the other side, which is kind of probably the elephant in the room, talking about a payments podcast without mentioning crypto, and obviously making a massive big comeback. And in terms of like the Bitcoin halving, I think is in a couple of weeks now as well. So it will be very interesting to see in 12 months what percentage of payments are running through crypto and if they've kind of shifted into more the B2B space and like things like blockchain and smart contracts, like seeing how much of an impact they've got in 12 months. Because I think we're probably still like pre-mass adoption of that. It still is a bit of like an outsider. But yeah, I'd be putting my money across like crypto and big markets like India and LATAM going really, really well.
Nice. Okay, and I think crypto is a really hot space, right? There's so much talk about crypto. We could do a whole nother podcast just on crypto, to be fair, if we wanted to.
Right.
And there's a lot of my clients that I work with in the payment space, including payments orchestration, cross-border payments, which is another big one.
Yeah.
That are starting to explore how crypto can be that additional next tier that they're bringing to their customers, and especially with emerging markets. You mentioned India, you mentioned LATAM. Africa, of course, is a big one right now as well. But look, I think you've hit the nail on the head, and I'm as I say, really keen to not put any money on this out now because I think I'm going to end up owing you a bit of money. But look, I really appreciate your time today. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you, and best of luck with your continued career at Paddle. It looks like you're on a really good trajectory there, and I wish you all the best with that. We're certainly going to be keeping in touch anyway, as you know. Yeah, really appreciate your time, and look forward to potentially working on another one of these with you.
100%. Yeah. Thank you very much for having me. It's great to like reflect and share on some of the experiences, because sometimes like everything's going a million miles an hour. You don't really get as much time to like reflect on everything. So yeah, I hope that there's been some valuable insights, and yeah, definitely hit me up for the next one. We can discuss maybe the predictions that time.
There you go. Maybe we'll get a panel sorted as well, and you can have a little bit of debate with each other as well.
Don't tempt me. Don't threaten me with this time.
Nice. Well, look, thank you very much again, and yeah, really appreciate your time. All right.
Appreciate it, Nathan. Have a good one.